Hi everyone, this is Donny Lowy from Closeoutexplosion.com, a wholesale business in Brooklyn, New York. Today I'd like to give you some tips on how to buy clothing for resale. Tip number one is you need to know your customer. You need to know if your customer is looking for brand name clothing or if your customer prefer private label clothing, which is priced substantially less than brand name clothing. You need to know if your customer is buying based on a certain style, a certain fashion, or if the customer prefers the clothing to be brand name, even if it's not the most fashionable clothing. But of course, often brand name clothing is very fashionable. That's why the brands have, their popularity and their following. So you need to also know your customers' spending potential. Can your customer buy a women's suit for $100, for $200, for $300? Or can they spend $50 at most? That's going to help you determine how much you yourself can pay for that clothing. Tip number two, when you buy the clothing, you should know what the actual wholesale and retail price of that clothing is. You could go on Amazon, go on eBay, go to your local department store, look at retailers online, see how much are they charging for that clothing, and then look at different wholesale deals for that clothing so you'll have an idea how much you should be paying for that clothing and what a good wholesale deal is. If you want to maximize your profit margin, when you do buy that clothing, look for overstocks, look for closeouts, look for excess merchandise. You might want to find clothing that is marked down due to maybe a slight irregularity, but that I would be careful with. So I'd recommend actually sticking away from that unless you're able to examine the clothing very carefully and you know your customers might not mind irregularity. But there's so much brand name overstock merchandise out there that's in perfectly, good condition or very close to good condition that I would recommend sticking with that clothing. So to get a really good deal, remember you could look for overstock clothing, shelf pulls, excess merchandise. Now, people have asked me about store returns. Store returns are a little trickier because while the clothing can be really nice, especially let's say if it's store returns from a department store, so it can be brand name clothing, the style could be really good, the fashion could be contemporary, but the issue is that the clothing could be damaged. Clothing is usually returned to a store either because the customer just changed their mind, the size wasn't good, the color, they felt they spent too much money for it, or the clothing got damaged and then they returned it. So store returns could range from being in brand new condition to very damaged. If you're going to buy store returns, either go visit the warehouse in person, see exactly what you're getting. If you can't do that, then you need to factor in a worst case scenario. What happens if a lot of the clothing is damaged? What if half of it is damaged? What if 25% of it is damaged? How much can you sell the clothing that's in good condition for? And will that still give you a profit after you cover the cost of the clothing that you cannot sell? Now, as far as actually selling the clothing, you could start out, if you have any family or friends that you know, show them the clothing in person, test out the clothing. If they like the clothing and they buy it from you, you can always buy more clothing and then sell it on a larger scale. You can also sell your clothing online on eBay, through Amazon, set up your own website. You can set up yourself as an online retailer, take pictures of different items, have a description, and that's of course going to be very time consuming, but you might be able to get some good money for it that way. You can also give your clothing to consignment stores and they'll share the proceeds with you, but at least you don't have to have a store yourself. You don't have to do the actual selling. You can set up a store yourself. That of course is going to cost you more money, but then you'll be able to keep all of the proceeds instead of splitting them and sharing them with someone else. Another option is to rent a spot at a flea market, and then you're committed to going there, let's say, when you rent the booth, or if you don't rent, let's say, by the month, you could only go when it is that you want to go. The advantage of a flea market is that you don't have the rent that a store has, and you only have to go when you want to go or when you can go. And another advantage is that the flea market brings the customers to you. The disadvantage is that the mentality of the flea market is that there's an expectation to pay a very low price for items. So if you're dealing with high-end clothing or high-end shoes or high-end handbags, it might be harder to get a really good price for them at the flea market. I myself sold at a flea market in the past, and I found that the best items at flea markets are commodity items by generic labels such as socks, such as t-shirts. But while having said that, if you can get brand name stuff at a very low price at a flea market, then you could definitely sell it at the flea market, of course, provided the flea market allows for the sale of brand name merchandise. So there's definitely a lot of ways to make money by reselling merchandise. Remember, the key is to buy merchandise that your customers will want or that prospective customers are interested in buying. Research the market, then also research the retail price. Retail the wholesale price, so this way you'll know you're really getting a good deal. Look for closeouts in that merchandise and then start marketing the merchandise. Okay, there's a lot of ways you can market it. We said online, you can do it offline, you can give out business cards, give out flyers, have a garage sale. Now, one thing I do recommend, I do this in my warehouse, and I recommend you do it as well. Every time you make a sale or anytime you encounter a prospective customer who's interested in your merchandise, take down the customer's information. This we could follow up later on and call them up when you have new merchandise for sale. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please visit my website, closeoutexplosion.com. The next time you're in New York, you are welcome to visit my warehouse. Have a great day.